This astonishing story unfolds amidst the sands and weeds of the Mexican desert, where rumors have long circulated about an object that crashed. In 1974, a mysterious incident occurred in which, according to some, UFOs and a small airplane were allegedly involved in a collision. Following this, the governments of two countries began a struggle for possession of the wreckage. A Mexican rescue team discovered something resembling a silver disc of perfect shape. Mexican military personnel covered this object and placed it in a truck. Subsequently, all participants in the operation mysteriously died. The United States government responded quickly and in an organized manner. In the small town of Coyama, located in the north of the Mexican state of Chihuahua, which is not even marked on some maps, events unfolded that changed its history. This town, slowly being consumed by the desert with an area of only 700 square meters and a population of around 2,000 people, is considered one of the most beautiful places on Earth. Despite the absence of a library or a local historian, Coyama has its own story, passed down orally. Accounts of the aerial collision that occurred here just 3 decades ago have become part of the local oral tradition. It all began with the departure of a civilian airplane from El Paso, Texas, heading towards Mexico City. On August 25, 1974, the plane flying to Mexico City crashed. It is said that the collision with the UFO occurred within the city limits and someone even witnessed the event. One local resident claims, "I do not think this is a fabrication. How could anyone make this up?" It is true. That evening on August 25, 1974 at 19:07, the quiet summer night of Coyama was preparing for a peaceful conclusion. However, 800 kilometers away from the city, the United States Air Defense System unexpectedly detected an unknown object hurtling towards the Gulf of Mexico at a speed of 4,000 kilometers per hour at an altitude of 25 kilometers. One could say only one thing about this object: it was not man-made. Initially, the dispatcher suggested it was a meteorite, but it soon became clear that it was something else. The object was descending and moving in jerks, which was unlike meteorites that descend only in an arc. It seemed to be heading towards Crisco, Texas. American Air Defense Forces were put on high alert. An unidentified flying object changed direction, turning left, and entered Mexican airspace just 80 kilometers south of Brownsville, Texas. The United States continued to monitor this strange spacecraft racing over Mexico. However, the radars did not detect a small plane that was heading directly towards the UFO. At the same time, another plane was flying from El Paso to Mexico City. Under the cover of night, this private aircraft was heading towards the Mexican capital, but it was not destined to reach its destination. At the same time, American military personnel noticed that the unidentified flying object disappeared from radar screens. An unforeseen event occurred. The UFO and the plane collided. One of the hypotheses was that a collision took place in which both the craft and the plane were damaged. On the 26th of August, 1974, at 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 hours after the disappearance of the civilian aircraft over the desert, a Mexican search team set out to find it. American intelligence was conducting radio interception across the border. At 10:35 in the morning, the Americans recorded a message from the Mexican military. The wreckage of the missing plane had been found very close to Coyama. Shortly thereafter, another shocking message was broadcast. The wreckage of a second aircraft had been discovered, and it was no longer a plane. The Mexican search team found a silver disc of regular shape, 5 meters in diameter and with bulges 1.5 meters thick on both sides. Its surface resembled polished steel without any markings or inscriptions. No bodies were found inside. However, the surface showed signs of damage, likely caused by a collision with the civilian aircraft and the subsequent fall to the ground. At this time, Mexican officials announced a ban on radio communications during all search operations. In response, American officials approached the Mexican government with an offer of assistance but were met with a refusal. As always, Mexican authorities denied the existence of anything unusual, claiming that it was merely a plane crash. While the Mexican team was collecting the wreckage, the United States began to form its own elite search unit at Fort Bliss, Texas. This unit consisted of 4 helicopters, 3 fighter jets, and a large sea helicopter, the Stallion. The fully trained team awaited its moment while U.S. intelligence assessed the situation. The situation remained under the control of the United States thanks to espionage operations, including a space surveillance system and aircraft patrolling at low altitude. American intelligence learned that the Mexicans had placed an Anilon on a truck platform and took it away from the crash site. During the observations, several dead bodies were spotted, raising suspicions among the Americans about the violence that occurred at the scene. On the 27th of August at 2:38, the military, not fully understanding what had happened, gave the green light to their search brigade. 4 helicopters immediately took off from Fort Bliss. The government of the United States responded very professionally and organized, deploying a team to the scene. Dressed in protective suits, American soldiers approached the dead members of the convoy. They did not have time to figure out what had killed the Mexican group. However, UFO researchers had their theories. One of them expressed the opinion that the Mexicans had somehow come into contact with a toxic substance of bacteriological origin, brought into our world from outside, which led to their demise. The American search team got to work and discovered a silver UFO, 5 meters in diameter, secured on the truck platform. The disc was lifted by a Marine helicopter, the Stallion, and sent to the United States. After transporting the object, the military began an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the death of the Mexican convoy, and they had many questions. After collecting the debris and bodies of the Mexican search group, they detonated an explosion at the crash site to conceal the evidence. Once their work was completed, the search team returned to base, but the exact location where the UFO was transported remained unknown. Some speculated that it could have ended up at Fort Bliss, Atlanta, or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This unprecedented event could only be compared to what happened in Roswell, New Mexico, in the United States. Even if the story of the UFO crash in 1974 was true, there were few corroborating pieces of evidence left. The description of this crash was passed down orally from generation to generation, but few took these stories seriously. Everything changed in 1991 when dozens of UFOs appeared over Mexico. In 1991, numerous sightings occurred, confirming that completely unfamiliar people, judging by their descriptions, saw the same thing at the same time on the same day while being hundreds of kilometers apart. For almost 3 decades, the Mexican desert has been the stage for incredible stories, and rumors have long circulated that a certain craft crashed in Mexico. An object entered the atmosphere, colliding with a small airplane at the border with the United States. This event prompted contemplation. Over the past 2 decades, incidents related to UFOs in Mexico have occurred that could overshadow all known alien sightings. However, the events that made Mexicans pay attention to what was happening in their sky did not happen immediately. In June 1991, one of the longest solar eclipses was expected, which could be observed in a narrow geographical belt covering central Mexico. A year prior, all Mexicans began preparing for the eclipse. It was a major event, and people across the country eagerly awaited it. Right after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the skies over Mexico darkened. Astronomers were setting up telescopes, while millions of people were intently gazing at the sky. In 1991, thanks to new technologies, video cameras became widely available, and many Mexicans used them to capture the moment when the moon obscured the sun. After reviewing their recordings, they were shocked. Some people nearby exclaimed, "Look there, what else is that?" They captured on film metallic objects with distinctly visible domes, which are commonly referred to as flying saucers. In places such as Mexico City, Tepeji del Rio, and Puebla, video footage emerged showing a strange silvery object hovering in the sky. These appearances during the eclipse instantly became the most discussed topic in the country. Although many confidently claimed that Mexico had been visited by aliens, skeptics were not quick to agree and put forth their own theories. This was one of the greatest events of the century in astronomy, and hundreds of astronomers from around the world gathered in Mexico City and other cities from where the eclipse could be observed. However, no professional astronomer reported seeing anything unusual. This certainly speaks volumes. Professional astronomers questioned any claims of UFOs and offered more scientific explanations. When the sun is completely covered by the moon, as it was in Mexico that day, bright stars and planets become visible for a few minutes. Venus, for example, was very bright and could easily be mistaken for a UFO. Some believe that it was Venus that confused people. Nevertheless, supporters of the UFO theory found the skeptics' explanations dubious. Since so many people in different cities had recorded these objects, some suggested that it was the planet Venus. However, Venus was in a different position, which could easily be established from the footage. During the eclipse, one strange thing happened. Later, while analyzing the video materials, it became clear that some of them captured the movement of objects. You see, Venus could not start moving before the eyes of people. This circumstance allows one to think that there indeed was a collision with a UFO. The footage from 1991 sparked a surge of interest in UFOs in Mexico, and people interested in aliens increasingly captured various phenomena on film. And I believe that this trend is very positive. Although the Mexican boom in UFO sightings was a surprise to most people, some ufologists believe that it was predicted more than 1,000 years ago. The Maya civilization occupies a unique place in the history of humanity. For over 600 years, they built cities, constructed reservoirs and temples in the shape of pyramids, and accumulated astonishing knowledge in the field of astronomy. It is remarkable how much the Maya knew about the sky and the planets. They were well equipped and conducted observations. They understood how celestial bodies moved and could predict any significant phenomenon occurring in the sky. The Maya recorded their knowledge in folding books called codices. Most of these texts were subsequently burned by Spanish priests. To this day, only 4 Maya codices have survived. Among them is the Dresden Codex, a document that provides some insight into the astral wisdom of this ancient people. This is astronomy in its purest form. The moon, the sun, constellations, all of this is present there. Anyone who has studied and analyzed these documents understands that they represent a true treasure. Furthermore, the Codex contains a table with the cycles of solar eclipses. The eclipse of 1991 was accurately predicted by the Dresden Codex of the Maya. But that is not all the mysteries of the ancient documents. It also mentions a meeting with the Star Brothers, in simpler terms, aliens. When I became acquainted with this information, I experienced a real shock. It turns out that the Maya already knew back then on which exact day UFOs would visit Mexico. Can you imagine, is this a coincidence or were they truly prophets? I am simply astonished. Astonished to the depths of my soul, I am astonished. Astonished. Many Mexicans agree that extraordinary events are occurring in the country. The boom in UFO sightings has turned into a real tsunami. Mexicans have been watching with excitement as the topic of UFOs gains global scale. Ufologists note that this boom has been partly fueled by the innate immediacy of the Mexicans themselves. For centuries, Mexicans have been captivated by legends, stories, elves, fairies, and other myths. Psychologically, this has prepared the ground for a positive perception of extraordinary phenomena. This is why a Mexican rarely says, "It's all made up because I haven't seen it myself." He is mentally prepared to encounter the unknown, and that is wonderful. Imagine, an ordinary Mexican is already ready to meet a miracle. However, skeptics argue that the phenomenon of the Mexican UFO boom is more of a social phenomenon than a result of actual visits to this country by little green men. UFO sightings are usually accompanied by a surge of interest in them, and information booms are directly related to the number of mentions of such phenomena in the press, as newspapers and television have been overflowing with stories about UFOs. People began to pay more attention to them. Since the first UFO sightings, witnesses have constantly become the target of ridicule. They were depicted in cartoons as fools unable to recognize a regular airplane and a flying object. But what happens when the witness is someone who does not fit into such a category? What if this person has a serious reputation and career? What if the witness not only understands airplanes but also flies them? Raimundo Cervantes has logged 17,000 hours over more than 40 years of flying. He felt that with such extensive experience, he had seen everything in this world. On the 28th of July, 1994, Commander Cervantes is piloting Flight 120 of Aeromexico from Guadalajara to Mexico City. He has flown this route multiple times and did not expect any problems. The sky was clear. As pilots say, you could see tomorrow, and I will tell you, we saw it. Approaching Mexico City International Airport, Cervantes sets his DC-9 on a landing course. At an altitude of 1,500 meters, the pilot receives a signal from the dispatcher. The path is clear and prepares to lower the landing gear. He gives the command to lower the front landing gear when suddenly he feels a strong impact on the fuselage. It was a powerful blow, not accounted for in the instructions. The airplane begins to shake, and Captain Cervantes has no doubts. His aircraft has collided with something in the air. However, there is no time for investigation, and the pilot continues the descent. Cervantes reacts professionally to the emergency situation. He declares an emergency and requests a section for conducting emergency measures, preparing airport staff to assist passengers in the event of an emergency landing. This was the main focus of his job. Lacking reliable information about the condition of the landing gear, he prioritizes safety measures. Trying to level the airplane and land gently, he is particularly concerned about the front landing gear. If they are damaged, the impact can be softened by reducing speed on the runway. When the landing gear is deployed, to their surprise, no impact occurs. Cervantes recalls, "You cannot imagine the relief I felt at that moment. And I think all the passengers and the entire crew felt it too. A disaster was averted." Nevertheless, Commander Cervantes speculates that some helicopter may have brushed against his DC-9 by coming too close. However, the radar controller's recordings refute this theory. Upon inspection of the airplane, damages are discovered that raise more questions than answers. The flight inspector who examined the aircraft finds that one of the hydraulic actuators had been cut by some unknown tool. This was very strange, as they had never had such tools. What caused the actuator of the landing gear to be cut? The subsequent investigation attributed the incident to the wear of parts. The airline denied the occurrence of an in-air collision. However, Cervantes steadfastly insists that his airplane was struck. This is not where the story ends. The strange collision of Flight 129 begins to accumulate new facts. Enrique Colbeck, the air traffic controller who was on duty that night, recalls a series of phone calls that came into the control tower an hour before the airplane's departure from Guadalajara. He says, "We received phone calls from various places reporting that some object was flying very close to the building at the end of the runways. These were very alarming calls. Nothing like that should have been happening, and I certainly took note of it." According to his observations, the object was directly in the path of Flight 129, which was landing. Many found the theory of a collision with an airplane unconvincing, but a few days later, another incident at the same airport strengthened suspicions. On the 8th of August 1994, the second pilot Carlos Corso was assisting in flying the aircraft of Flight 304 of Aeromexico, which was coming from Acapulco for landing at Mexico City International Airport. The morning sky was partially covered with clouds. Corso's partner was intently monitoring the instruments, and nothing indicated any problems. He was flying excellently, fully focused on them, while Corso was responsible for the surrounding environment, communicating and assisting during the landing. When the aircraft emerged from the clouds, Corso, shocked, discovered something unexpected. "We were descending from 4,000 meters, just coming out of the clouds, and then I see this large object in front of us. I was really scared. I thought we were going to collide, and I exclaimed, 'Oh my God, we are going to crash into it!'" The mysterious object with an arrow zipped past, narrowly missing the nose of the aircraft. It was a huge object. The length of the object was between 15 and 25 meters, and it was made of some material resembling platinum, but completely pure, without impurities. Corso Bestro, the pilot, managed to regain his composure and successfully landed the aircraft without any incidents. Later, he shared his observations with the air traffic controller, who, in turn, admitted that Corso was the fifth pilot in a week to report an unusual object in the sky. "I can report to you," he said. "About 99% of the pilots I've spoken to believe that we are not alone in the universe, and the evidence we have supports this. We take this very seriously because aliens can influence the airspace of Mexico. I am absolutely sure that there is a potential danger. We do not know what generates this phenomenon, how it manifests, and why it disappears." Almost 10 years later, another incident related to the skies of Mexico shocked the entire world. Unlike previous encounters, this case became widely recognized, including by the Mexican government. Every year, on the night of the 15th of September, thousands of people gather in the main square of Mexico City to see their president ring the bell that signaled the start of the struggle of Mexicans for independence nearly 2 centuries ago. In the following 24 hours, the city fills with the sounds of parades and celebrations. However, since the early 1990s, Mexico's Independence Day has acquired yet another feature. The 12th of September is Mexico's Independence Day, and a military parade takes place on the streets of the capital. For several years, an air show has been held featuring the Mexican Air Force, which typically flies directly over Mexico City. People capture on film the moment when the planes fly over the houses, and there are numerous video recordings in which certain objects can be seen alongside the aircraft. I personally saw several recordings where they were present, and I filmed the sky myself on parade days, recalled one of the witnesses. On the 16th of September 1991, during the air parade, an amateur camera captured a mysterious, brightly glowing round object. Exactly 1 year later, in the same location, witnesses observed another UFO in the sky. On the 16th of September 1993, during the maneuvers of a military helicopter unit, a silver object was caught on film, weaving between them. 3 years, 3 sightings, and no comments on this matter from the Mexican military. When discussions about the appearance of UFOs during the parades began, the Mexican government did not express any opinion either for or against. They preferred not to elaborate too much on the subject, although it concerned many. This is indeed a sensitive issue for Mexico. It is not surprising that UFO proponents, who have accused the government for decades of silence regarding the facts of UFO visits, continued to insist on their claims. Classified reports, secret military projects, and constant denial of eyewitness testimonies only fueled interest. On the 5th of March, 2004, the 501st Unit of the Mexican Air Force was engaged in the search for yet another aircraft transporting drugs. Suddenly, the military pilots became witnesses to strange events. The Mexican Air Force was patrolling the southern border to prevent the infiltration of drug-laden aircraft from South America. This occurred regularly, and they made several sorties each day. But on this day, everything was different. During a daytime inspection flight, the military noticed something on their radars and assumed it was a drug trafficker's plane. Observing the object, they noted that its speed was uneven, sometimes reaching more than 600 kilometers per hour. During the pursuit, the crew used an infrared tracking system known as FLIR. This system, similar to a camera, is mounted on the aircraft and serves to observe in the infrared spectrum, allowing for the visibility of objects that are not visible in the normal light spectrum. Infrared lenses of the FLIR system, installed outside the aircraft, transmitted signals to the crew, allowing them to observe what was happening in real time. However, when the patrol approached the mysterious object, they were unable to detect anything. This ultimately demoralized the pilots. Throughout the flight, the military looked straight ahead, as the radar indicated precisely in that direction, but found nothing. Soon it became clear that the patrol was running low on fuel, and continuing the chase became impossible. The military headed back to base, and the unknown object soon disappeared from the radar. But this was just the beginning. The FLIR system operator continued the observation and soon noticed bright lights appearing at cloud level. What suddenly appeared on the screen was not just simple light. Periodically, at least 11 objects could be seen smoothly moving through the clouds. The crew members felt a slight fear, not understanding what they were facing. This was an experienced crew that had flown in this area before and had used the FLIR system for almost 2 years. However, on that day, as the cockpit conversation recording showed, even the most seasoned pilots began to get nervous. "Buckle up," one of them said. "Let's take a look." Another added, "Come on, don't scare me." The crew felt that the objects were not just flying alongside, but were gradually surrounding the aircraft. "It's moving at our altitude. This is impossible," one of the pilots noted. "Gentlemen, we are not alone." To which another replied, "Yes, we are not alone, that's true, but damn, what is that? Are they surrounding us?" Then the light orbs suddenly disappeared, and the frightened crew members returned to base. Over the following weeks, the Mexican military conducted an investigation into this incident, interviewing the crew members and thoroughly analyzing their testimonies. However, no answers were found. It seemed that this case was destined to remain an unresolved mystery, but one phone call changed everything and became a turning point in the history of UFOs. I received a call and was told that we have something that might interest you, recalls Mexican television journalist Jaime Maussan, one of the leading experts in the investigation of UFO sightings. His impressive resume caught the attention of the Mexican government, which approached this civilian reporter for assistance. The Secretary of the Ministry of Defense of Mexico, taking an unprecedented step, handed Maussan a secret video recording. I was given this tape and told, please, be impartial towards the military, be honest towards the pilots, be kind towards the people, conduct an investigation. From now on, you are authorized to carry out an independent examination, Maussan recounts. He was granted full access to the recordings of conversations during the flight, weather summaries, and most importantly, the opportunity to meet with the crew members. I spoke with these pilots for the first time in the history of Mexico. They told me everything they saw. They were extremely honest and sincere, and I believed them, he asserts. Honestly, I did not understand what I was seeing. Until that moment, I had never encountered anything like it in my life. It was something amazing, and I was a bit scared. I am, of course, ashamed of this, but it is the truth. I was scared. On the 11th of May, Maussan held a press conference to inform the public about the information he had received. Skeptics did not take long to debunk the theories of ufologists. Their explanations, as always, were quite prosaic. They spoke of ball lightning and linked the incident to classified military developments. Some skeptics suggested that it was a malfunction of equipment. Explanations appeared one after another and just as quickly fell away. Only one of them deserved special attention and sparked considerable debate. Many scientists suggested that the tape might have captured burning oil wells located approximately 100 to 120 kilometers from the observation site. In the infrared range, these objects appeared to be shining and heated. Although they are not visible to the naked eye, night vision systems are designed to capture the thermal signature of objects. However, many expressed doubts about whether the FLIR system recordings actually captured the burning of oil wells. The first step in analyzing these lights was to study their shape to determine how it changed from frame to frame and from minute to minute. If these lights, as skeptics claim, were burning oil wells, then the flames in the recording should have pulsed. But the use of computer programs for detailed viewing of these lights revealed a completely different effect. When analyzing individual frames, the glow at the edges lost intensity, but in the center, there was always an element that did not change at all. It was a sphere, and the likelihood that this was flame was ruled out. If it were flame, it would pulse not only at the edges, but also across the entire area of the object. There are other arguments against the theory of a fire at the oil wells. Although flights in this area were conducted daily, no one had previously reported sightings of this kind. The only way to definitively prove anything would be to repeat the flight under the same conditions, along the same route, using the same flare system, and preferably on the very same aircraft. Until this is done, the incident involving the crew of the Mexican Air Force plane will remain an unresolved mystery. However, for UFO researchers, this does not diminish the exceptional significance of this incident. For the first time, the government turned to ufologists for assistance. Mexican UFO researchers remain optimistic and believe that this incident could signal the beginning of a new era of transparency regarding UFOs. One of them states, "I think we are in for many, many new UFO sightings. And I hope for greater openness from the authorities regarding these facts. After all, we Mexicans really want this. This was just the beginning." In 2005, when it seemed that the strangest things in Mexico had already occurred, the incredible happened. Since 1991, Mexican witnesses have recorded hundreds of hours of footage that they believe captured UFO appearances. Some are astonished by the sheer volume of these recordings, but even more important is what they contain. Of all the millions of video recordings available, most show balloons, airplanes, stars, and other nonsense. Overall, this is a misconception, sincere misconceptions. Probably only 10 or 15% of them are useful. It is these 10% that attract the attention of ufologists and representatives of the media. Among the most interesting UFO phenomena captured on video are the so-called fleets. A fleet is defined as a group containing more than 3 objects. These fleets can move horizontally or vertically, forming very strange shapes such as boomerangs, spheres, and discs. On the 10th of June 2004, in Guadalajara, Mexico, an amateur photographer captures images of objects of unknown origin in the sky. On the 21st of June 2004, 380 kilometers from Guadalajara in Cuernavaca, another fleet is recorded. On the 30th of March 2005, nearly 960 kilometers to the north, even more inexplicable objects appear in Torreon. On the 11th of April 2005, 800 kilometers to the south, the sky over Mexico City is teeming with mysterious flying objects. One of the researchers emphasizes, "I think that in this way, someone is trying to establish contact with us." In my opinion, they are trying to convey some information to us. For example, in England, they leave circles in the fields, and here we have a different method. Skeptics deny the existence of fleets, considering them nothing more than weather balloons or birds. However, as practice shows, it is better to see everything with your own eyes once. The appearance of fleets in June 2005 made people believe in UFOs. One of the recent visits was the event in Xalapa in the state of Veracruz. This was particularly interesting because the witnesses were people of very high rank. On the 24th of June 2005, at 10:30 in the morning, a public ceremony was held to inaugurate new patrol cars for the local police department. The event was attended by Mayor Fidel Rara Beltran, high-ranking police officials, and representatives of the local media. A few days later, the press reported that the so-called UFO observed in Talpa had become a topic of discussion throughout Mexico. Everyone read this news. However, soon reports emerged that these UFOs were actually balloons being released by children from a local school. This explanation only provoked new questions among UFO supporters. If these were balloons, then why did they hang in the sky motionless in a certain formation for more than half an hour? A witness who observed the phenomenon claims that it was something more than just 14 spherical objects shimmering in different colors in the sky. They formed a triangular formation and remained in that position for 30 minutes. I think this is an outstanding case because the governor himself was present along with all his advisors and even police officers, he says. How do you prove to the governor that he did not see anything strange? This phenomenon was the focus of a meeting of UFO specialists and numerous enthusiasts who gathered from all corners of Mexico to discuss the boom and reports of alien visits to the country. According to these men and women, the contacts that took place deserve close attention and clarification. Among the incidents discussed was a supposed collision of an airplane with a UFO in 1974 near Caya, Mexico. As a result of this incident, members of the Mexican convoy were killed, and American military personnel arrived at the crash site, seizing the object and transporting it to the States. All this information is rather sparse. However, some data related to this case allow us to assume that something indeed happened there. Now, 3 decades later, the history of the crashes in Cuyama still raises more questions than answers. Are there any facts that could help unravel this mystery? Today, any journalist or professional interested in the investigation could gather all the information in a day of fieldwork. Travel to this small town, identify all the witnesses, question them in detail, pay whoever needs to be paid, and summarize the facts. Although one would have to pay generously. This case requires more thorough examination and collaborative efforts from scientists and UFO experts, both in the United States and in Mexico. In general, this is a case that needs to be studied very carefully. The story of the first appearance of UFOs in Mexico continues to be supplemented with new facts. Recently, while in Chihuahua, I inquired about this case. There are rumors that certain photographs related to the incident exist. I was promised that I would receive them, but the locals are still afraid. It seems that they are hiding these pictures, hiding and fearing. Fearing what? The crash at Lovcoyama remains shrouded in mystery. Did it really happen in the Mexican desert more than 30 years ago? Did the Mexican search team fall victim to some unknown biological weapon? Perhaps we will never know the truth, but it can be confidently stated that over the last 15 years, Mexico has regularly faced forces unknown to us. For supporters of the UFO theory, this has been a golden age of contact with extraterrestrials. While the residents of Mexico looked anxiously and hopefully at the sky, they awaited new mysterious visits.